Good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome to this special webinar convened to meet the finalists from the Social Partnership Forum's award in the HPMA's awards category this year. My name is Sarah Gorton. I'm a head of health at the trade union Unison, and the most important hat that I wear for the context for today is the co-chair of the NHS Social Partnership Forum, and together with my colleague Danny, who will introduce himself in a minute, we're the co-chairs of the National Forum and sponsors of the award today. So one of the reasons why today is really important is that one of the missions of the Social Partnership Forum is to spread and share good practice. So fundamentally, that's what we're here to do today, to hear 4 examples of great partnership working, so that we can spread the good news, share practice and bring people together. But I think up front, just wanted to really acknowledge the context in which we're talking together today. So this has been a year where conflict between trade unions and governments and employers has probably been more in the news than at any time I can remember since I was a small child. And I think in that context, it's really, really important that we don't lose sight of the important work that we do together and the relationships that are so critical to delivering a better working environment for everybody who works in the NHS and a better environment in which all of the service users and patients access care and services. So a massive thank you to all of you for putting your examples forward, for participating in what I know is a really grueling judging process, and for offering your time today to share the examples of good practice working that we're going to hear about. So I'm going to hand over to Danny to introduce himself and get us started with our webinar.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you everyone for joining us today. My name's Danny Mortimer. I'm the Chief Executive of NHS Employers, who are the Employers Association for the NHS in England. And again, one of my more pleasant responsibilities is to co-chair the Social Partnership Forum with Sarah, and we in turn work with our ministerial colleague Will Quince as well, who meets with employers and trade unions over the course of the year as well. And I think what unifies all of us is a belief that partnership working can and does make a difference to staff, and through them, as Sarah said, to their service users and patients. And that's why sponsoring this award, as Sarah said, is so important, because it gives us a chance to kind of tell the stories of how that works in practice. And there is real power to those stories and those experiences. And you'll see that today from the finalists that are going to speak to you from various parts of the UK. Before I introduce our first organisation, our first speaker, just a couple of housekeeping things, if I may. We are asking all attendees to keep their camera and audio switched off whilst you're on this kind of Zoom meeting. That means that the speakers can kind of speak without interruption or distraction. So thank you for that. You are able to post questions. Each organisation will speak for about 10 minutes, and we'll have 5 or so minutes for conversation and discussion. You can submit any questions you've got through the chat function, and Sarah and I will keep an eye on those. The webinar is also going to be recorded, so if there's a bit of the conversation you want to rewind to, or you want to kind of point colleagues towards, you're going to be able to do that through the recording. There are also ways of engaging with the conversation about this through HPMA. They've got a Twitter account at HPMA Awards. And actually, obviously, the conversation about this continues right through the kind of awards programme, which actually the awards ceremony happens in the autumn. And there'll be further opportunities, obviously, to kind of share and celebrate the successful finalist at this stage. So yeah, really delighted that our 4 shortlisted finalists have been able to join us today, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first first organisation, which is Devon Partnership Mental Health Trust. And Catherine is going to lead us off. Catherine, we're in your hands.
Thank you very much, Danny, and also Sarah. I'm going to give this technology a whiz and see if I can share my screen with everyone. As has been introduced, I'll spend about 10 minutes just introducing and sharing our journey and our example for the HPMA Awards, and then there'll be that great opportunity to ask kind of questions and explore any topics if people are interested to do that. So my name's Catherine Harris. As Danny, you've introduced, so I work at Devon Partnership Mental Health Trust in the southwest of England, and we're here today to share our story and our example of a journey to strengthen a restorative, just and learning culture across our organisation. So in preparing for today's presentation, I was asked to explain and describe some secrets for our success, and also think about things that we may be able to share, points of learning for sustainable success. And I must say I found this a little bit ironic, because the things I'm going to explain to you they're not secrets. So it's reasonably simple stuff, but nevertheless incredibly important to bring together an effective partnership approach and also deliver some change that positively impacts the experience of our staff and fundamentally the quality of care that we can provide with the people we support. So my first secret, which is not a secret, is that we chose the lofty concept of restorative, just and learning culture. And we spent our first few months as a group which involved colleagues from staff side, colleagues from the HR and OD profession, as well as managers and clinicians around the organisation, really mulling over what a restorative, just and learning culture might really mean. And we then chose to go forward from that point and specifically focus on a couple of actions. So for me, that was a really important part of our journey, not just to agree with a principle and get behind that principle as an important aspect of the future direction you're looking to travel, but take another step, which can at times feel uncertain and it can feel risky in the moment, but take some steps to turn that change into action. The second point that I'll introduce today is that we took moments, especially when working in partnership, to explore new approaches and new ways of working, as well as when we took time to brief our staff on the work that we'd achieved and what it would mean for them in their roles on a day-to-day basis. We were bold and comfortable enough to be quite honest about difficult topics, and also if there's ever an opportunity to demonstrate and show some vulnerability, I'd highly recommend taking that opportunity. And it certainly helped us in strengthening our relationship from a partnership point of view, as well as helping us bring staff along with us. And the third and final point probably leans on the well-known concept of 80-20, and how if you approach new ideas and ways of working with an ethos of continuous learning and always looking for feedback and improvement, it really will help you take concepts and get work done and get things across a line. So in our example, I'll talk about how we worked in partnership and we then were able to reach decisions about implementing new ways of working, despite knowing that it probably wasn't perfect. And there were probably some things that we would want to tweak or revisit in the future. So In terms of cultural change and putting that into action, the step we took around restorative just learning culture, the first thing we did is we considered that idea and focused on 3 areas. So this is bedded in huge amounts of research and evidence base. We chose to focus on compassionate leadership and the research of Michael West, psychological safety and all the great work that Amy Edmondson has done, as well as civility and respect and the research base, especially led by Chris Turner in health and social care. So we used these areas of focus to make our work as real as it could be to the people and our staff across the organisation. And that's also informed our future priorities and plans around organisational development. The second action, which is really why we're here today, is we took a bold step to remove and shred our grievance policy, disciplinary policy, capability and performance policy, and an acceptable behaviour policy. And we worked very closely with colleagues in staff side to rewrite one single policy which replaced all of those things. And at DPT, it's called Promoting a Positive Working Environment. And that's our policy as well as our procedure. So this really built on some of the early achievements we've seen across the sector, especially in Merseycare and their approach for prioritising restorative just learning principles in employee relations. But we think that this policy goes a couple of steps further, and it's a point that we are incredibly proud of at DPT, because we've seen many of the successes which other organisations also see across the NHS when you apply restorative just learning to employee relations. So we've seen a reduction in the number of formal meetings. We've seen a reduction in the examples where a fact-finding piece of work leads to no case to answer. But we still have some situations where a formal procedure is in place. And we still have some situations where we need to work with our colleagues and our staff and ask them to take time away from work, which would in the past have been called a suspension. So the thing that our policy does, which builds on the work around us, is even in those most challenging situations and circumstances, the language we use is very, very different to the language you would have traditionally seen in HR policy and practice. And where possible, we're looking to adopt a compassionate and involving approach with the person who might find themselves the centre of a fact-finding piece of work, or even in a formal meeting, which might lead to a really difficult decision to end their employment. So that's the second action that we took, and something that I'm quite proud of in terms of our success in partnership working. I did then mention honesty and vulnerability. So these are 3 slides I'm going to share with you now, which we used in staff briefings. And at times it was quite uncomfortable. And I felt nervous going into those large staff briefings thinking, oh, I'm not sure how this is going to land. And that's because much of the thoughts I'm about to share on the slide here are thoughts I've had myself at times. And then as individuals, it's understandable when something happens around you that doesn't go the way we want it to go. It's common for us to think, oh, that was wrong. That shouldn't have happened. They shouldn't have done that. Or to think that someone else might need to be held accountable, that it's somebody else's fault, that my role in all of this is probably to report them. And above all else, I'm really glad that today that wasn't me. And being honest about that as part and parcel of our human nature and something that we might from time to time be able to relate to, was difficult. But what we did was describe that it's okay for that to be a one-off thought that comes to mind. When it's a pattern of thought, or when it's a thought that you see develop across a whole team, what you'll lead to is a culture that's either closed or a blame culture. So we then went on quite openly to talk about blame culture and explore some of the research, which is very clear to say that if that's the way we approach difficult situations as individuals and as a team, things will not change. It's very, very unlikely that there's ever an example of willful harm. So a blame or closed culture doesn't really seem proportionate or fair to the situations that you'll be involved in. And it's also not an environment that's going to emphasise restoration and repair where harm has happened. We certainly know, and there's clear evidence that describes our quality of patient care will decline. And speaking up can feel really quite scary and something that's out of reach for people. So having been honest about that, it helped us to talk about how it would look and what it would feel like if instead we worked in a culture that was restorative, just, and focused on learning. And the thing here that's really quite crucial is there's no rocket science involved. So the things that would come to mind is checking in with colleagues, seeing if you're okay, considering who else may have been affected by the situation, really getting into the detail of what's happened and why that situation's come about. Considering what might need to be done just now to settle the situation, and then going on to really focus on our need for learning and improvement, as well as restoration and repair. So that was our second point around honesty and vulnerability. And now, really briefly, just going to mention our final reflection and thing I'd share with colleagues today, which was a principle of learning and improvement. And so for us, it was quite clear to see that working in this way was the right thing to do. And I'd never want colleagues to lose sight of that. We've got evidence which is describing to us a positive impact of our new approach, but it's certainly not perfect. And from a partnership working point of view, I know that we were able to redesign and rewrite a brand new policy that replaced 3 other traditional policies within a time frame of 2 months and implement it within a further 4 weeks. Now, that pace of change was quite new to me in the NHS, and the way we achieved that success was because we had open dialogue with staff side colleagues. We knew that there would be some things that in practice might not work exactly how we'd set them out to work, and we were open to noticing that, responding to feedback, tweaking it as we go, and learning along the way. So my final kind of comment and suggestion for everyone really is there's so much common ground, as much as it can be challenging working in partnership. If you look at opportunities where you're able to notice that you hold the same principle, or you approach situations with the same enthusiasm, use those opportunities to demonstrate effective partnership working, and it will go from strength to strength. And then finally, the quote that I've got ahead of on the slide here is a quote from Michael West when he did some compassionate leadership workshops with us last year. And it really stuck with me as a recommendation that he's giving to the NHS, especially around leadership and management, is when we're doing something, do the right thing, and can we please stick with it? So it's great to have been able to implement the changes that we have, but it's part of a longer journey for us. And I think there's further work to do, whether it's in the realm of absence management or other areas of policy and procedure, that we could really demonstrate some fantastic partnership working. Finally, then, it's not about me at all, nor Jim, who's our chair of staff side. It was a team effort, and this is all of our team who helped in the design and implementation across the HR group. So thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And presumably that's partnership working that involves some kind of water sport.
That was paddleboarding. So,
paddleboarding. Okay.
Yeah, because we are absolutely blessed to live in the southwest of England. I can see the sea behind me just now. And this was an opportunity to come together in Exeter, which is a central hub for many of us, and go up and down the river.
Well, Sarah and I will add that to the list of potential national SPF partnership activities. We'll be in touch if we need a hand with that. Thank you so much for the presentation and for the really kind of authentic way in which you've talked about what you've achieved in Devon. I suppose one of the questions that's come up is how big a change was this way of working for the HR team and the staff side reps? Because we'll all have grown up with a certain way of working in terms of particularly grievance and conduct and capability. And clearly you've reset all of that quite profoundly. So for the practitioners and the staff side colleagues, how did you go about managing that change?
Thank you. It's a great question. And it's a question that comes up time and time again when I'm working with other organisations that are interested and would like to see a similar step change take place in their trust or in their council, for example. So one of the things I'd probably focus on is, the policy and procedure is still founded in the ACAS code. So when you get to the nuts and the bolts of procedure, it looks and feels very similar to the areas of expertise that our professions already have. And I wouldn't want people to lose confidence just because the language we're using is a change in language. The procedural aspects are still very similar. But what we found is that the team leaders and managers who were needing to press a reset button really and reconsider the approach when a situation occurred involving their staff. Our HR team just quite closely mentored them, and I observed that our HR team then came together on a regular basis, often with staff side colleagues, and we peer reviewed situations because we were all in it together, if I'm honest. So we came across some of our best learning in terms of the procedure by working in that way. And we were open and honest with team leaders to say, look, I'm navigating this policy probably for the second or third time this week. It's new to me. It's also very new to you. And we'll do it together. So it is a step change, but I don't want us to lose confidence or sight of the principles of the policy are very familiar principles to HR professionals.
And that message, that set of messages about the principles remain the same, the expertise remains the same, but actually that ability to be honest about the fact that it is new, that it is different, to invite review and feedback from peers. That those are really helpful messages. Thank you so much, Catherine. I'll hand over at this stage now to Sarah to introduce the second case study.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
Grand. Okay, so the next two examples that we're going to see are on the very hot topic of flexible working, and we know that retention is very dependent on being able to give people work patterns that that suit them. So really looking forward to hearing both of these examples, but starting with our next set of finalists. And you are all from the Isle of Wight Trust, and I'm going to hand over to you for your 10-minute presentation before we go into questions. Just a reminder to other participants, if you've got a burning issue or a question that comes up, please feel free to drop it into the chat. And I think, Jay, you're going to kick off this this presentation for your example.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I'm just going to try and do the technical bit of sharing screens. So thank you, everybody. So we are the Isle of Wight NHS Trust. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through and introduce ourselves in a moment. We're going to do a quick intro about our trust, give a little bit of context around our partnership working, and then Sam and Amy will then take over and we'll talk about our project that we entered. This is the finalists that we entered into, for flexible working, and we're going to talk about what we've achieved and what we have learned. So I am Jay Chappell, staff side lead, chair of QPAC, which is our staff side. I am branch secretary for the Isle of Wight Unison Health branch. I've been with the trust just over 13 years, and my background before my staff side lead role was a clinical acute background. Sam?
Hello everybody, my name is Sam Osborne. I'm one of the people and OD partners here at the Isle of Wight NHS Trust, and my portfolio, because we're an integrated trust, is community mental health divisions here at the Isle of Wight.
Hi everyone, I'm Amy Rolfe. I'm a people and OD partner supporting acute and ambulance.
So we just wanted to talk a little bit about our trust. So as Sam's already alluded to, we are the only NHS trust NHS organisation in the country that provides acute, ambulance, community and learning disabilities and an ambulance in the country. So that makes us very unique, and we think we're right in saying that makes us very unique in our staff side, that there is no other staff side set up in the country that we can think of, but we'll happily take answers on postcards if we're wrong on that. So as I said, we're fully integrated. We employ about 3,700 substantive staff, and we are a major employer on the island. We're a population of about 140,000, and that does increase during the summer months and during the Isle of Wight Festival and other festivals that happen on the island. Just as some context of what we deliver for our patients, we in 22-23 we saw 164,000 outpatient appointments, 60,000 diagnostic tests were carried out, 112,000 111 calls were made or received, 68,000 attendances in A&E, and 60,000 mental health and learning disability contacts were made. And what's really important, I think, for us is the people who use our services are often our colleagues and our neighbours and our friends, and our community makes the island a bit of a unique place to work and live. So just to talk about our partnership working from its past, so previous to 2018, when I took over as the chair of staff side, we did have an established partnership working model. However, it wasn't great. It didn't really work. It was kind of lip service in its essence, and there was lots of gatekeeping from managers and our staff side leads at the time. In 2018, there was a change in both executive leadership and staff side leadership. We had quite a turnaround in our exec team, and then also there was a new chair and vice chair elected at that time. In June 2018, the chair of staff side was seconded to part-time, so my role was then split between acute and doing staff side work. And then in July 2018, the partnership forum governance was reviewed and strengthened, and we also signed a facility agreement that was signed on behalf of all 12 recognised trades unions and professional associations at the trust. The staff side lead then was given a seat at the board and all of the subcommittees that lead into the board. And then the staff side lead role was increased full-time in September 2019. And we've continued to increase our dedicated facility time in health and safety, maternity and ambulance, all have dedicated facility time. Our partnership working model is embedded in what we do. It's executive-led. Early engagement, again, is what we do. Staff side and staff side partners are seen as partners, and it's encouraging us to have early engagement, and also it's given us the opportunity to share our good practices with other organisations. So that's a little bit about our trust and our partnership working. I'm now going to hand over to Sam, who's going to talk you through our flexible working project.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you for that nice warm introduction. So I think just to reiterate what Jay said, we've been on a journey with our partnership working model here on the island, and we're focusing the next few slides on our journey around flexible working, but this is just one example of a truly embedded model that we have here at the Isle of Wight. It's at the heart of everything that we do and all that we do, but the objective around our quality improvement initiative was to co-design in partnership with trade unions, senior clinical colleagues, operational and corporate teams, our Trust Flexible Working Action Plan. You can see from the high level timeline that it shows the start of our journey. We launched a number of Your Voice staff engagement events in relation to flexible working, so we could truly try to understand from our people their experience of flexibility, what levels of access they had to flexibility to start with, any perceived barriers, and what support they may need to help enable flexibility. We used these engagement events to promote also a Trust internal staff survey on flexible working, so that we could really try to get under the skin of our current state with flexible working to help inform the programme of work that we're moving forward on. These events generated really rich discussions with staff and our leaders across the Trust. As you know, flexible working can be a slightly contentious issue, and one size doesn't fit all either. So it was a really good opportunity to start to have some really open conversations with staff. The output of the staff survey that we shared in across our organisation using various methods to do that. We also shared the findings from that initial staff survey at an all-staff team briefing session, which was absolutely done in partnership with our staff side colleagues, and we co-presented and produced those findings across the organisation. In terms of September 21, we were really lucky to join our NHS England Timewise Flex for the Future programme. As part of that programme, we were allowed 5 change leaders to attend the virtual programme. Jay, as our staff side lead, was absolutely one of our change leaders, and the other remaining 4 change leaders were senior clinicians from across our other 4 clinical divisions within the Trust. And we also made sure that those senior clinicians were also representative of our professional staffing group. So we had a clinical director on there, we had our lead AHP across the Trust, and we had several senior nursing colleagues also as part of that change team. We established a Trust-wide flexible working steering group, which had a really diverse and inclusive membership. This again included staff side lead, other corporate colleagues, so HR, OD, our diversity and inclusion lead, and again our senior change agents and other corporate leaders, particularly from other groups such as estates and facilities colleagues. Again, all professional groups were represented. We used this steering group to kind of socialise, develop and complete the programme of work from the Flex for the Future programme. We undertook a number of diagnostic tools that were shared with us as part of the programme, and we truly worked in collaboration together. I think that really demonstrates how embedded partnership working truly is at the Isle of Wight NHS Trust. It's just what we do. It's very normal, and it's done as BAU. It just happens, and there's no second thinking to the kind of partnership model and collaboration that we have here at the Isle of Wight Trust. Again, that steering group, we had some diverse range of views, again, as you would expect, in terms of not just people that were champions of flexibility, but also people that may have some concerns around access to flexibility and how we move to a more kind of embedded culture around access to flexibility from day one as part of the terms and conditions. We then worked in partnership around some of our flex programme and co-produced together a trust action plan, again working in partnership with Jay but also with our steering group, so that we had a really proportionate but really clear action plan about how we were going to take the programme of work forward for the Isle of Wight Trust. Again, that was done in partnership, and one of those actions was to develop a new flexible working policy. The approach we adopted was a blank bit of paper for that policy, and to really kind of think about the cultural journey that we were on. And we co-wrote that actually with Jay, and then socialised that wider across our organisation, but also with our flexible working steering group, and really trying to convey the cultural journey to support flexibility, so that we could get that balance between staff experience, but also putting our patients at the centre. Again, sort of just moving on very quickly, we then kind of moved on to developing a 22-23 action plan, and we developed that. And again, that was looking at case for change, working with our executive colleagues and how we endorsed our policy principles, in terms of the cultural shift we're trying to create here on the Isle of Wight, and then thinking about how can we implement ESR functionality for flexible working to improve our data and recording moving forward. Currently, where we are now, sort of taking us to April 22 and beyond, again, we're in a very similar position where we've delivered our original action plan, and we're now we've developed and co-designed in partnership again our 23-24 action plan with our wider steering group, and we continue on our flexible working journey here at the Isle of Wight Trust.
Thanks, Sam. So in terms of what we've achieved so far, and I think it's important to recognise that this work around flexibility continues, so we're continuing with our steering group in partnership with our trade unions. Our NHS staff survey results, as an integrated organisation, we receive 4 staff survey reports each year. So for our 22 results, we saw improvement and above average scores for staff feeling able to speak to their line manager around flexibility, and that was across our acute ambulance and community sector. And ambulance was rated best in class for ability to speak to their line manager. So a real significant focus across our services around the culture of flexibility, and it becoming part of the conversation that happens on a day-to-day basis. And our results through our internal staff survey actually showed that local flexibility, the informal flexibility, is working really well for our people. We saw improvements around levels of satisfaction for flexibility for ambulance, community and mental health, and we maintained the level within our acute services. And again, ambulance was rated best in terms of national average around the level of satisfaction. For our mental health and learning disability teams across the South East, they actually achieved best performing trust in joint position with another local organisation, and they were above average. So our staff survey results are saying that our people really value the work that we've done around flexibility, and we continue to use those indicators to monitor how we are progressing as an organisation. And finally, we just wanted to share with you today what we've learned. So partnership working, as Sam and Jay have already said, is absolutely what we do as an organisation across not just us within HR, but across our divisions and our line managers. They know that our staff side model is very much around early engagement. Jay probably gets numerous phone calls each day from managers wanting to give him the heads up on things that are happening so they can agree a way forward. Stakeholder participation, as Sam said, we really wanted to have an inclusive and a representative membership of our steering group, and that really was successful because we were able to share pockets of really good practice across our divisions and across our teams, but also for those that were a little hesitant perhaps around what flexibility means, it really helped us to have that open dialogue. We learned that we had to take it one step at a time and not to get overwhelmed. Flexibility is such a big topic around retention, and we really worked to focus on priorities, quick wins, and where areas of biggest gain, and that work continues. Staff experience, keeping the conversation going with our people, using our staff survey indicators. Our trade unions are a great source of listening ears across our organisation, so we get lots of rich data across our trade union colleagues as well. co-design was really important. So not only is partnership working really important, but making sure that this isn't a corporate HR function led, that we are co-designing this with our clinical and operational colleagues. And finally, sharing and learning from best practice. So we have supported NHS England by recording a podcast with them around our journey in terms of partnership working and flexibility. We're participants in the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Retention Task and Finish group where flexibility sits. We absolutely use the NHS Futures platform to find out what other organisations are doing and what we can learn from others, but also to share what we have done. And I just think our final message really is around our success has been around having a shared passion and enthusiasm for doing the right thing for both our people and for our patients. And we absolutely see the value of working jointly because we're all here for the same reason. Thank you very much for your time.
That's great. I know it's a real challenge, especially when you've got such a big team delivering this. So thank you so much for that presentation and for confirming that Bananarama were right all along, that it's not just about what you do, it's the way that you do it. So really, really good to see that example. And just in terms of some of the challenges that are coming up around flexible working, you know, you started, Jay, talking about the different types of services that your trust provides, and what types of roles has it been most difficult to fit in with the ethos of flexible working? Where have you found it most challenging?
I would say, and it's been no surprise to people that work shifts, people that work in the clinical services 24/7, finding other there is only a certain amount of flexibility, but being fair with that flexibility, but giving people fairness across, if a ward sister or charge nurse has got to fill her shift, safer staffing, all of that, and somebody wants flexible working. But what I would say around that is the change process of that, getting people to think differently around flexible working. When I was on the wards, flexible working was for children and people with children only, and that was all you could have. But now it is really different, and it's just, I think, as Amy said about we're taking it slowly. It's about taking it slowly and educating and bringing the managers up to speed around how strategically they could think differently, I would say.
Great. And Amy or Sam, perhaps you've got a perspective on how is this already starting to make inroads either into reducing the number of people that are leaving for work-life balance issues, or for bringing people in from the temporary bits of the workforce into the substantive staff groups?
So in terms of our data, part of our action plan for this year is really focused around the data quality to be able to answer some of those questions, Sarah. So we don't have a comprehensive kind of data set that is showing us that evidence. I think geographically we are an island, so our ability to recruit is hard in any event. So our retire and return statistics does show that we are able to provide some flexibility to retain some of our staff. So I think absolutely it's, in terms of hard evidence, I think we would struggle, to being completely honest today, to show those indicators, but that is part of our action plan for this year. So Sam, I don't know or Jay, if I've missed anything.
No, I think you've answered that beautifully, Amy. I would just say that there's definitely, when you start to look at and drill down to our staff survey results, particularly in ambulance, they are doing something really right there. They've had to be creative. They've had to think about flexibility as part of their attraction strategy. They've had to think about how do they offer flexibility through working groups around their shift patterns and things like that to try and give staff a balance. And I think they're definitely doing something right because of our geography, but also to aid recruitment.
Well, it's brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing your example with the group. And I doubt this will be the first time that we have contact with your work, and look forward to seeing updates in the future. Back to you, Danny.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you so much, guys. And as Sarah said, I think this next case study kind of will add to that conversation about flexible working, about some of the kind of cultural baggage we have in our organisations about what it means and what it means in practice in this day and age. So I'm delighted that colleagues from Northern Ireland have again entered this category. Our winner last year was one of the health and social care trusts rather from Northern Ireland. So Nolene, I'm really pleased that you can join us along with colleagues to talk about the piece of work you've been doing in health and social care in Northern Ireland.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to share our flexible working journey across Northern Ireland. My name's Nolene McCrainer. I'm an Assistant Director of HR in the South Eastern Trust, and I'm also joined by Joanna Dare, who's a Senior HR Manager in the Western Trust. So health and social care in Northern Ireland. So who are we? Well, essentially we are separate employers made up of 6 trusts and a business services organisation employing 74,000 staff across Northern Ireland for a population of 1.8 million. So what was the scale of our challenge? Well, to be honest, Section 33 update was launched by England and Scotland in September 21. Northern Ireland hadn't even commenced the conversation. At the same time, we had significant industrial action before and then COVID in between. And our trade union colleagues, their expectation was that Northern Ireland would adopt the update immediately for all staff and organisations. We had also significant staff shortages across all areas. So we knew in our hearts that flexible working would be a hard sell. And we also had health and wellbeing data from Northern Ireland University studies, which was clearly showing us that we had the worst staff wellbeing in comparison to other nations. Even HR, ourselves across the region, we tended to work in silos and we never strayed too far from our subspecialty functions. For us, and this is really important, this was much more than a terms and conditions update. It required a culture change to be successful in our aim to widen access to flexible working across Northern Ireland. So to deliver flexible working, we needed to work in partnership and at pace. And how did we achieve that? Well, we used a once for Northern Ireland approach. We were certainly stronger together. A regional team was set up quickly, co-chaired by the Assistant Director of HR and a regional trade union representative. Team members from both organisational development and terms and conditions across all employers joined trade union colleagues in a number of task and finish groups. In partnership, we collectively agreed an ambitious implementation timeframe of 4 months to develop all resources needed for cultural change by the 1st of April 22. Together, a programme of activities which were very much date-driven and project managed were delivered. There was significant activity which increased to weekly meetings towards the launch. But collective leadership was absolutely key. Everyone had an equal role to play. And we agreed that all stakeholders, all organisations would go live at the same time. And that was the first for Northern Ireland. Our approach was described as being the best example of partnership working I've been involved in. Importantly, we had a shared purpose and we trusted each other. All members had equal roles. Trade unions actively sought case studies from their members on where flexible working was successful. Trade unions also drafted questions for the survey and they distributed the surveys through their union lists and social media channels. The trade union contribution was invaluable. It identified the real barriers for change. We had constructive debates about the reasons for refusal, which we built into role plays for animations. And we agreed 2 joint statements. And this was a new approach for Northern Ireland, which solidified our commitment to flexible working. Now, Joanne will share some of your thoughts about how we tried to shape the culture.
So I suppose when we talk about secrets to success, as Nolene says, we had a shared purpose and we had the trust there between ourselves and our trade union colleagues. I suppose the other secret to our success, we feel, is how we had a focus on the culture. This wasn't just about putting in a policy or a procedure. For it to be successful, we needed to change the culture within our organisations, and we needed to flip the mindset where flexible working was seen by some as a problem and not an opportunity that it could be. So the first thing we did, we asked our staff. So we received 11,700 responses from a regional survey that we developed. And when developing that survey, we worked with our trade union colleagues to make sure we were asking the right questions so that we could get the answers that we needed to identify our approach. So 11,700 responses in Northern Ireland was high for us, so it did indicate to us the importance of flexible working to our staff. So with the results of the survey, we looked at them both as a HSCNI regionally and our organisation specifically to determine where our biggest challenges were. So when we were rolling out the implementation, the first thing we needed to do as individual organisations was get our own board buy-ins. So we all had to go through that separately. The information from the survey gave us a lot of data that we could use for that, and we developed a consistent slide deck for all organisations that helped support our business cases, and we used the information from the survey to drive the message home. So in highlighting some of the key findings, we were able to show our boards that really this was a change we needed to make. One of the other things I suppose that was most important to us was about supporting line managers. So from our survey and from research and from our trade union feedback, one of the key enablers and one of the biggest barriers was our managers across the organisations. So we knew it wasn't just about handing a manager a policy or procedure. We needed to equip them in how to deal with these requests. So we developed resources across the region that would be used, and we developed those along with our trade union colleagues. So the first thing we developed was our framework, which provided clear steps. And again, that was through our pay and conditions subgroup, and that was with HSCNI staff as well as our trade union colleagues. And we had a separate group then for culture and leadership group. And this focused on a management pack on how to deal with requests and more importantly, how not to deal with requests. So we talk about flexible working as a retention tool. We know that not all flexible working requests can be approved. So we had to equip our managers in how to deal with those requests so that they weren't leaving people wanting to leave the organisation for being turned down. Some of the other things we included in our resources were top tips for managers, understanding roles for them, and case studies. We also highlighted to them the benefits, not just for the staff, but to the services in the organisation and therefore to our patients and clients. One of the biggest lessons learned, I suppose, that we've had from the whole project was the importance of data. So when we were building our business case, we used data a lot. Data formed a huge part of how we approached the task, and gathering data both within the organisation and working with our trade union colleagues for their information and their feedback on case studies in particular and areas of concern. We were able to build the business case for change. So looking at our workforce profile, initially across HSCNI, we looked at a 5-year period, and we looked at our joiners and leavers and our current staff makeup. We also looked at the vast research out there on generational needs. So what are each of the generations want, what they need, and how those generational views may impact dependent on our profile makeup. We also used analysis of demand versus supply, which showed that we really couldn't keep up with the demand that was out there within the organisation. An example of this is where we had 36% of our social work posts in a 1-year period that weren't able to be filled. Not only did the data help us define our approach, but it also helped us to get our trust board buy-in, but it also helped us to change the mindset of our managers, because by showing them the data and not just talking about flexible working to them like maybe we had done previously, it was, they were able to see the facts and figures to know that if we don't change something, nothing's going to change and things will just get worse. I talked about our survey, and what our survey told us was that 82% of all of our respondents felt that flexible working was extremely important to them. So that was on a scale of 1 to 5, and they indicated 5. Some of the barriers they defined were demands of the service, management buy-in, and organisational culture. So we knew that the focus on culture was an approach that we needed to take. One of the most worrying things from our survey, and it was a question we felt we had to ask, was what was the impact of your request being turned down? And while we had feelings of low morale and low commitment and bad relationships, we had 25.5% of all our respondents who had been turned down for a request considered leaving their post, 23% considered leaving the health service altogether, and we had 14.2% that considered changing their career. And with an organisation that has huge workforce challenges already, they were not figures that we like to see. So we knew we needed to have a real focus on improving things and becoming that employer of choice. So Nolene mentioned about the joint statements, and as a show of true partnership working and emphasising the importance of the change, not just for ourselves and as HSCNI management, but also for trade unions. There was a joint statement that was signed by HSCNI management and the lead negotiator for regional health trade unions. This was something that was never done in Northern Ireland, so it was a big step for us and helped to promote the change across the region.
I'm going to cover now, so what was the impact of working in partnership and some maybe of the learning very, very quickly. So we did successfully implement Section 33 on time, and we delivered our theme 8 of our HSC workforce strategy. I suppose we were very proud of what we achieved, and we created that energy and synergy, all working together towards a common goal. We have definitely strengthened relationships across areas who don't normally work together in terms of maybe the OD family and trade unions. Turnover has decreased compared to the year before. And in terms of learning and replications elsewhere, well, we have applied the approach to a significant regional project on reduction of agency, and we will replicate the approach as we wait for the home working piece that is due shortly. Also, HSC workforce strategy priority groups are now designed with a cross-functional purpose. Work streams include trade unions and cross-functional teams. And finally, just in terms of the impact on the workforce, we have been very successful in terms of the implementation. We've had increases in applications. There's also been a significant decrease in the number of flexible applications which have been rejected across HSCNI. And there's a couple of examples there in terms of where it's reported that there's been an increase, and there's an 85% now approval rate for nurse and midwifery, which we maybe just discussed earlier in terms of some clinical staff. But we've also got less applications rejected. And we've got a significant bit of feedback from a porter who has indicated that through the new framework and our flexible approach, they've been able to support carers, their carers acted as a carer and been able to be released and support their family. So that's been quite significant. But, we haven't completed our work. The journey absolutely continues, but we do believe you can build upon foundations anywhere if they're well and firmly laid. So listen, thanks very much for listening. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, both of you. Really, really appreciate you sharing that and the sheer amount of work that went into the kind of the approach as well. I wanted to pick up that question of where you go next. You've obviously said that there's still work to do. What are the kind of one or two key priorities that you've identified with your trade union colleagues in terms of where you go with next?
Yeah, so I suppose it's making sure that flexible working is absolutely embedded across HSC. It's making sure that the commitments we've already given, we do follow that through, and we plan to do that within our own organisations, but also regionally to do some comparative work. So, for instance, our trust board in South Eastern Trust, they've got such an appetite for this information, and we've produced now some dashboards which we have shared South Eastern Trust have developed a bit of a template so we can share that across organisations. So it's just making sure that what we say we do, and that we evaluate it, and that we make sure that's embedded, and it becomes part of our DNA, right across the system.
Yeah, as Nolene says, one of the key things is about not just stopping here with trade unions and implementing it in the organisation. We have all across our organisations developed reports on the findings, and they are shared with our trade union colleagues so that they can see that where there is a difference being made, but that we can also, as an organisation in partnership with our trade unions, focus on those areas where there are high levels of rejection to see, are there alternative options that we can start to consider, or are there issues remaining within those certain sections. But it is something that is important that we are monitoring and keep recording, and that is built in now into the system.
Brilliant. So I get a sense from both of you that the kind of importance of board leadership and that tracking of data that you mentioned in particular, Joanne, and then the second piece of actually trying to identify the areas that need a little bit more help, a little bit more education and encouragement, and actually working in partnership with trade unions. Because I guess sometimes it's a while since I've been on the tools, but sometimes the challenge can be in the team as well as with the manager. We often focus on the manager as the block, but the manager sometimes has to convince a team that letting someone work a bit differently or make some different choices can work for them. And again, trade unions can help play a part in that conversation, can't they?
Yeah, and Jay and his team mentioned earlier about those areas that find it particularly hard. So some of the areas aren't turning it down because they don't want to, they just don't know what else they can offer. So it's working with them to identify the barriers and how we can learn from other organisations as well to see how they can implement things within our own areas to see how we can support further.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Thank you. The two conversations really kind of echo and reinforce each other. So thank you so much. Thank you, Nolene. Thank you, Joanne. I'll hand back to Sarah for our final case study. Thank you.
Fab. Great. Okay, so our next case study and final case study is from Liverpool University Hospitals NHS Foundation Trust. And I think, James, we met earlier this year in slightly less auspicious circumstances than a webinar. Seem to remember standing outside your lovely new hospital in very freezing cold conditions. So it's really, really lovely to have a really good positive example of partnership working to talk to you about today. And you're going to start us off before Elaine and Joe get involved in your short presentation before questions on your partnership project. So over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, really pleased to be invited here today and obviously to be shortlisted. So as you mentioned, so I've got senior colleague Elaine Butchard, Deputy People Officer, and Joe Baldwin as our staff side chair here at Liverpool Hospitals. So let me share my screen. Let's have a look. So just in terms of context before we get into first slide, really just appreciating colleagues that are on the call are across the country really. So just to ensure that people are familiar with our organisation. So Liverpool University Hospitals is made up of a recently merged organisation of Aintree University Hospitals and the Royal Liverpool and Broad Green Hospitals. So three large acute hospitals up here in Liverpool, and we merged in 2019. So that's just to set the scene of who we are. We encompass around 15,000 staff here at Liverpool. So really our project that we're sharing today encompasses really how we have embedded partnership working in order to achieve the significant challenges here at Liverpool that we've had to face and successfully have overcome, and we'll take you through that shortly, and how we obviously want to sustain our effective and really welcomed partnership working with our colleagues within our trade unions, trade union bodies. So how our initiative came about, so we're focusing on 2022, particularly here in terms of this period. But within that 2022, so we had changes in trust leadership, and within the trade unions we also had refreshed partnership. So through their elections we had both changes in senior leadership and within our trade union body as well here at Liverpool on the outset of 2022, with Elaine as Chief People Officer. So coming down the road, so remembering that context of us being a newly merged organisation in 2019, and obviously we obviously had to deal with pandemic as of all our colleagues within NHS within that period, but significant challenges really for us to come, and we have a new hospital as well coming down the road in October of 2022. So we had that coming down the road with 7,000 staff, then moving from our old building into the new in October. And we also embarked on transferring 6 key services across our sites. And the purpose of that was obviously following merger, we wanted to ensure that we're delivering on why we merged, which was to reduce duplication and inconsistencies of care here within Liverpool, and that ensued in moving our services across the cities again to reduce that duplication and ensure access for the communities that we serve to those services. So I've alluded to them there, but the challenges that we have overcome through our partnership working was the merging of the 3 large hospitals, who each possess significant operational demands. So within Liverpool, you'll be aware, because of our communities and demographics that we serve, some of our highest poverty and challenges that we have to face here within Liverpool. As a result, we have experienced some of the highest levels of COVID-19 experience within the country, and additional waves of COVID to those that were experienced nationally. We had changes in leadership operationally, from executive team downwards, and also within our people and OD team, and as I've mentioned, our trade unions following their elections in January 22. We also appeared, because we are an organisation of significant size, mandatory vaccinations on the outset, considering what we needed to deliver on within 2022. On the outset of 2022, we had as all colleagues, we had a significant number of staff non-vaccinated. We have mandatory vaccination. So for us as an organisation, we had 1,800 staff non-vaccinated, and that was the highest risk within Cheshire and Mersey, so across the region that we're based. It's a really high number that would obviously cause threat to service delivery and to our patients. We also were in the process of implementing a new operating model. So as I mentioned, following our merger in 2019, amongst obviously the challenges of the pandemic that we were working around, we had spent the previous 2 years trying to integrate our teams across all of our 3 sites. However, at this moment in time, following changes in our executive team, we were looking then to move back to a site-based leadership team, and that follows this next point in terms of external scrutiny. So as a new organisation, we had obviously reviews of CQC, and as part of that work, recommendation was decisions to be made closer to where work is carried out, and therefore we were operating or looking to implement at that point a new operating model of site-based leadership. But as a key thing really for 2022, amongst all of those challenges in that context, we had expectations to open our brand new hospital, and that was coming down the road to open it in October, and the transfer of 6 key services for the organisation. So really, I will pass over to Joe on this section, but really that encompasses the challenges that we face, and key to that would be we acknowledge and appreciate that we needed to work closely with our trade unions, and Joe as our staff side chair particularly, in order to deliver and achieve what we needed to in that year. So I'll pass over to Joe here now.
Thanks, James. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Joe Baldwin. I'm the staff side chair, and I'm also the branch chair of Unison. So I think partnership working is key, and like James alluded to earlier, one of the difficulties that we had was that we were a massive organisation, and more importantly, we've got about 16,000 employees. Now, my branch, we've got about 8,500 members in our branch across all the Liverpool City region hospitals. And I think for me as the chair of the staff side, the key for partnership working was working with Elaine when Elaine was the interim chief people officer. Now, Elaine, I'll bring Elaine in a minute, but I think Elaine will tell you that at the time it was very, very different back when Elaine was the director of people back in the Royal. And I think when we worked together in partnership to try to think of the right words to use, Elaine and I worked really well together to bring the staff side together, and not just staff side, the management side. And I think for members, we had, when me and Elaine signed the letter that said about the mandatory vaccinations, members came up to me and said, "Joe, why is your name next to this executive person?" And I laughed and I went, "Oh no, that's it." I said, "Because we work in partnership." "Oh no, Joe, I thought you were against management." And I thought, no, that's not what it's like. And that then gave that education for me to then talk to members to say, "Oh no," I said, "it's not about them and us." I said, "It's about partnership." And fast forward a year, our trust have managed to change policies, work in partnership. And not only that, the members then realise that actually it's not about that it's them and us, it's about us together. And the amount of members have come up to me and said, "Joe, can I reach out to James, or can I reach out to my HR contact?" And I'm like, "Yes, you can." I said, "You just have to have that conversation." Because, as I say, my approach is very much like, I'd rather knock on the door to the manager and say, like, "Get the kettle on, let's have a cup of tea and a biscuit and let's have a chat." And before that wasn't the case. It was like the managers went on the policy, went, "No, this is a policy, I'm taking them to task." But when you have that conversation and the culture change that myself, James, Elaine and the rest of the staff side have done, and not only that, the staff side that I chair were very different. So I had to take not only the management, but also the staff side on that journey to say, "No, let's not be draconian," which is a horrible word, I know. I said, "Let's not be draconian, let's talk to each other," because at the end of the day, first and foremost, we're all human. I obviously want the best for my members, and at the end of the day, it's James and Elaine's staff as well. So together, we've managed to have those local conversations with managers. And for me, I spend my time going round each of the 3 sites and mother sites, but obviously these sites, Broad Green, Aintree and the Royal, and having those conversations with managers and saying, "Look, let's, before you apply the policy, let's have that conversation." And then I go, "Oh, right, okay, let's have that conversation, Joe." And that is honestly the great, and again, I'll bring Elaine in literally 2 seconds because I know we're limited on time, but the grievances, everything to do with policies has significantly reduced because of that informal part of the conversations that we have. And that's primarily to do with the partnership working that we have as staff side and as business HR. But I think I'll bring Elaine in for Elaine from a senior HR point of view to explain other things. But I have to say that I'm absolutely immensely proud of the partnership working that staff side have achieved with our business HR colleagues. And I think we have to instill that, whether it's in the Cheshire and Merseyside footprint and actually nationally, because we have proven that over time with that partnership working that we've achieved so much for, obviously for my members as from a Unison chair, but also for the staff in general. But I'll bring Elaine in.
Thanks, Joe. And I hope you've got Joe's passion that's come across in terms of how passionate we are in terms of working together. So we have been working, around these issues, and I think it's fair to say, it's been at times an uneasy, a marriage that we've had to work on this in terms of our relationship like any other. But what we've got, I think, is a real respect and appreciation. We've really had to dig deep sometimes and work through some really challenging and have some really difficult conversations, but be prepared to come back to talk and work together, really. We've had our chief executive is now, again, key to this. We've got that leadership and that, drive to keep us working together. And we've been working, as Joe said, really informally to resolve those challenges, which, if anybody knows about this organisation, that was not where we were at all. And our trade unions, are working closely with us around developing that culture and the organisation that we want to see at Luft, and we think our staff and our patients deserve.
So in terms of summing up then, in terms of, what we've achieved through this new, relationship that we're obviously looking to sustain going forward, is we successfully opened our new hospital, pleased to say, on the 21st of September. And we delivered that through a 21-day move plan into the new build without patient risk and or staff dispute as well. We transferred those 700 staff across those 6 key services, and one of those being the high acuity stroke unit for Cheshire and Merseyside, and with no employee relations issues. So all credit to obviously the staff and our relationship. We've mitigated the significant risk of the 1,800 staff being non-vaccinated, so real, efforts there, working together, and we mitigated that to reduce that significant figure to just over 200 at the point the government then retracted the mandate. We've now implemented a site-based operating model following those 2 years of integration, and work continues to strengthen that. And we now resolve less than half the number of employee relations cases that we did previously. And we've also seen improvements for our RES and DES scores as well. Obviously, moving towards the latter end of 2022, do feel that we need to mention that we were one of the first organisations within Cheshire and Mersey, and I believe in the country, to be subject to industrial action. And again, I think that was a real indication really about how we, obviously support our trade union colleagues and our staff with their voice, and we work particularly well to overcome the significant operational challenges that has obviously posed the organisation over these months. But again, that's flipping that into a real positive around how we work together with staff side around supporting staff voice. But as we say, as we work to overcome the challenges, the industrial action that none of us want to experience, but we can really support our staff to do that. So I think the key thing there is, our strapline there would be that we keep calm and carry on moving forwards. And it's just really kind of thank you to say, with colleagues here, thank you to Joe and how we work together really between trade unions and management here at the organisation. So thank you.
And if I can just add one last thing, that Elaine's absolutely right, that the passion that I've got, at the end of the day, I want to make sure that my members are really, really happy. And that seems to be it. But going back on with James, and actually Sarah touched on it earlier, because obviously she came to visit us, thankfully, on the picket line at the Royal, which was a very, very large picket line, may I add. But more importantly, I think to prove that partnership working, and I think this is unheard of, if I'm being perfectly honest, that when we were on the picket line, I'm not going to lie, I was stressed out. I'm only 22, do you know what I mean? It's aged me terribly. But anyway, we had business HR colleagues coming down to the picket line with tea, coffee, sandwiches for our members. Now, I would love to ask loads of NHS organisations, has that ever happened to you? That I think that proves that the partnership working that we have as a staff side and business HR plus other management that we had were OD colleagues and were business HR colleagues coming down with tea and coffee to make sure that our members were warm and they were fed and stuff. So I think that we have spearheaded that partnership working in the Liverpool City region.
Well, thank you all so much. I mean, firstly, frankly, I'm amazed. As a veteran of Joe Baldwin meetings, I'm amazed you've stuck to time. So thank you all so much for that. But I think it's also a great reminder of the fact, so often we ignore the fact that actually that opportunity to re-educate and constantly promote the core principles of partnership working, and that there will always be these challenges. We work in an environment where work in the NHS and work in health and social care in general is always going to mean that we're in receipt of decisions made by other people that we have to, we have to work around. And I think the description that you all talked about around the mandatory vaccine policy. So Danny and I were very conscious of the conversations that we had through the Social Partnership Forum about that over, what felt like, a number of very tense months. And, but actually working through that policy at local level, and the way that you described going from that very, very high number to just over 200 people at the time that the policy was withdrawn, that speaks to the amount of good partnership working that went on. So it's really, really great reflection, even though I never ever want to have to do anything like the VCOD policy ever again, because it was absolutely awful having to do that. So, one of the questions that I wanted to ask was about the impact of your new building. So just, can you say something about the as well as the merging, what has been the impact on your relationship of actually having that new building that people can work in?
It's a fantastic building, and if anybody wants to come to Liverpool to have a look round, we're really proud. The biggest impact has been, it's single rooms, so that's been quite a challenge for us to work through. But nevertheless, I think, we've been able to manage that, as James said, without, in 21 days we moved services, and we had that real commitment. But I think, for our staff, they deserve to work in that building, that environment. It took a long time for us to get there, but it absolutely makes the difference. So yeah, it has had a significant impact. I think people working in those better conditions. It's not without its challenges. There are issues that we've had to overcome in terms of space and catering facilities, but we're working through those things, and we're able to work through those things together, Sarah. So yeah, it's fantastic. We're really proud of our new building.
I think what I would also say there, Sarah, Elaine alluded to the single room demographics of the new build, and one of the key things there, obviously, that impacted on skill mix, etc., required for the new build. That in the context nationally of challenges with recruitment, under Elaine's leadership, we led a number of new innovative ways around recruitment, and Joe and staff side were really involved in that and really supported. Joe himself on interview panels, etc. And again, working through that, in readiness, in those months, again, was an additional challenge. Whilst yes, transferring the 7,000 staff into there, but also recruiting additional staff to support those new demographics. So again, the support of Joe and staff side, and both practically, but supporting that was really appreciated.
300 nurses. We recruited 300 nurses, RNs. Really proud of this. 300 nurses and 300 healthcare assistants. And so, yeah.
And I think
a big challenge.
Yeah, it was, and I was absolutely proud to be part of that recruitment drive. And I think we just need to bear in mind that the Royal was supposed to be built 10 years ago. And when I talk to members, it's like it was supposed to be built 10 years ago when it was just the Royal and Broad Green. Obviously, we've merged now, and we're a massive trust. But the good thing about when I've highlighted any issues that members have came to me about, the executive team have tried their best to deal with it. And again, together in partnership, we've managed to have those conversations with members to say, look, whilst we appreciate what you're saying, it was supposed to be built 10 years ago. We are where we are. However, Tony, who's one of the site directors, he says, right, what can we do about this, Joe? Let's look at it. And then, yeah. So I think us, I'm absolutely proud of the new Royal. I think it's absolutely lovely. And like Elaine says, if any colleagues on the call want to come and visit, you're more than welcome, because you'll love it.
Well, with that plug, we will end that section of the webinar. Thank you so much. Hopefully, by the time we all get together at the awards ceremony, you'll have moved on to your next project and can give us the summary of the next batch of challenges that that you're working through together. So that's great. Danny, do you want to say something in closing?
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah, and on behalf of everyone who's here, thank you to the organisations who've who've presented today. The kind of judging process that you have to go through is fairly exhausting. You've got massively complicated jobs that you're doing either on behalf of your organisations or on behalf of your members and staff side colleagues. So we really appreciate you taking the time to share your experiences and to do it in a way that's kind of so honest and it's so real. I think there's always a risk for any of us in this, that we kind of give an account that doesn't quite feel real, but actually each of you we're really honest about what you did and how you did it and why you did it and what you've achieved, and that kind of comes through in spades, and good luck to each and every one of you. The award ceremony, I know, is on September the 19th. We, the HPMA, I know, would want us to commend that award ceremony to you. I know also, though, most importantly, Sarah and I would want to commend that kind of philosophy of grown-up, sometimes difficult, but always constructive conversations that have been evidenced in each of the four case studies today. And we believe in the work that we do nationally. We believe that makes a difference, and I think you've seen really powerfully today from each of the each of the three organisations and the whole National Health Service in Northern Ireland, the difference that kind of grown-up, constructive relationship can make to staff and patients. So thank you, everyone.